In the meantime, let's talk. I can't Dionysus. I gotta go, man. It's already way past my agreed upon time. I'm eating into grown-up afternoon time that's going to be very costly for me to lose, actually. I still didn't get to read the full. Yeah, I'll do a rant, or not a rant. I'll do a soapbox on the announcement, though. But I do want to make sure I didn't get a chance to read the whole article is the problem. I just had, my morning was too busy. Let me, if you'll give me a second here, let me glance. Okay, let's here's what I'm going to do to help me prepare for this, and also go ahead and maybe it even helps the video. I'm just going to read out loud some of the key parts here, and start there. All right, everybody. Wizards of the Coast released their state of the beta, their monthly state of the beta. There was lots of big news this time, and I wanted to cover it in more depth than I did yesterday. And we're gonna take a look at it together and figure out some takeaways together. So I'm gonna go like this. First, I'm going to link you to this page, so I'll link it in the show notes in the stream notes as well. But the link I just posted to chat will get you to this, and then I'm going to go to left monitor, and we're just going to look at it together real quick before I give you my 5 cents on it. So you can watch the video if you want, but mainly it just talks about some renewal, which is interesting. But we'll get to it all. Yeah, we'll get to it all down here. I'm not going to watch the video. We'll do some reading. All right, rotation. Throne of Eldraine's release is just around the corner, and with it, our standard set rotation. Rotation is an exciting once-a-year refresh of standard where the environment is shaken up. When the fall set releases, the 4 oldest sets in standard rotate out. So then they show the map. All experienced Magic players know this already, but we get a lot of new Magic players through Arena, so this is helpful information for a lot of our newer Magic players. But what I would call out for you guys to note is that they're calling rotation exciting and a refresh and a source of renewal. Renewal. Well, anyway. I think it's funny that they're doing a lot of marketing speak around a very painful point in Magic, which is rotation. Rotation is when 4 sets worth of cards are no longer useful in the most dominant way to play on Arena, which is standard. So they're trying to sugarcoat it a bit here, but that's all right. That's part of what you do with these things. So just a note, though, that they're clearly putting a lot of positive marketing buzzwords around the idea of rotation in an effort to have it go down a little easier. It hurts, but it is good for standard. It's great for Magic. And I think that's why most experienced players, we've all embraced it because we understand what it does for the game. If we didn't have rotation, we would be playing, what, Vintage? And Magic would be desperately trying to make new cards relevant? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Rotation is what makes sense, but it's painful, so they're trying to ease people into it. Okay, this means that in a few short weeks, Standard will bid farewell to Ixalan, Rivals of Ixalan, Dominaria, and Core Set 2019 cards, as well as we welcome Throne of Eldraine to the MTG Arena family. Throne, if you haven't heard, is a new world featuring an Arthurian legend and fairy tale aesthetic with Magic's signature twists, in addition to its MTG Arena promises to shake up the Standard format. With the 0.18.00.00 game update, we'll add more information in-game for players because we want to be extra sure that everyone is prepared for the exciting times ahead. Okay, the big questions and answers. Standard 2020 rotation will happen on Arena after the release of Throne of Eldraine on September 26th. No collection resets. There will be no reset, no wipe, no removal of cards. Those cards will still be yours to play in non-standard formats. Historic play. Just because some cards are leaving Standard doesn't mean you can't play with them. In November, we will be launching Historic, a deep format for experienced players that leverages MTG Arena's digital playground and a growing catalog of Magic cards. Finally, we've made a lot of changes to Historic since we initially announced it, so please keep reading. We will. Let's keep reading. Renewal rewards. Okay, renewal. This is seems like their big effort to take the sting out of rotation. Rotation is like a vaccine. It stings a little, but is good for the health of everything, right? So just like when your kid or you gets a vaccination, your doctor may distract you with taps on the arm or give you a lollipop or in other ways, some way distract you from the sting that's about to hit your arm, right? So that's what renewal is clearly to me from a design standpoint. They're trying to make the sting of rotation actually fun and exciting through rewards. We'll give you a lollipop for the sting. So what are the rewards? XP. September 9 through 26th, standard 2020 events. 200 XP every 2 consecutive wins. I don't know if there's a cap to that. Maybe they'll tell us down below, but it looks like you get to grind extra XP from standard events. Note this is events, so probably means stuff you buy into for gold and gems, but maybe there will be free events that this works with, but I expect this is a paid thing. But since this wasn't promised, well, it depends. Anyway, we'll see if this costs us money. Starting September 26th, first login, 10 rare individual card rewards. So everybody just gets some rares. Here, have some rares. Have a lollipop. Eldraine set mastery, levels 1 through 25. Without renewal rewards, 12 Throne of Eldraine packs, 2 mastery orbs. What does this mean? With renewal rewards. So it looks like there's a way to do renewal rewards that get you a bunch of extra stuff, but we don't know what this means yet. So we'll figure this out below. But it looks like renewal rewards can impact your mastery stuff. All right, we'll take a look. Maybe it's another paid thing. With a new card set on a new plane and a new standard environment, we want to give you a warm welcome to Throne of Eldraine. This means special events and rewards leading up to its release on MTG Arena. And then we keep the party going with even more earnable rewards after September 26th. Okay, events. Starting on September 9th, we'll be holding special standard 2020 events that will help you get ready for the new standard. These events will allow you to play with the decks using only cards from Guilds of Ravnica forward. Okay, so preparation standard, you might call it. As we head into Throne of Eldraine preview season, this is the perfect opportunity to brew some decks while keeping an eye on the new cards you may wish to add when the set releases on September 26th. Okay, I'm gonna go aside here when I feel necessary, but I think this is great. Excellent decision. We were talking about ways to handle the transition period, and this is a really quite a brilliant one. It's one thing to, in your head, know that cards are going to be rotated and that you want to start brewing ahead. But if you don't have the infrastructure on your digital platform to actually give you matchmaking for it, it doesn't matter. So I think it's really neat that they're saying we're going to kind of make an alternate standard that is a preparation standard for rotation that allows you to see what's good once you cut off those final 4 sets. So I think that's genius. Good work, WotC. Hey, and this is what I was worried about up top. These events will have no entry fee. That's great. That means acquiring this extra XP will not require you to spend gold. It will be available in best of 1 and ranked best of 1 structures. So not best of 3, but that's okay. Yeah, and so then oh wow. Okay. Anybody complaining about not having a way to grind towards your XP, check this out. Apparently there's no cap on this XP, so now you can be level 1000. Maybe I'll try and be level 1000 and just do nothing but grind mastery XP on this event. But that's great. So more great news for people wondering if the mastery pass is going to be worth it. Looks like if you like dabbling in standard and preparing for the upcoming format, you'll have a way to naturally grind some XP while you do it. So that's pretty cool. Okay, and this is a major piece of info too. Core set 2020 mastery set will end at 4 a.m. on September 26th. So we'll make sure to buy that on the free-to-play account before that happens. Rewards. Players who've logged into MTG Arena prior to September 26 will also have special renewal gift waiting for them. Okay, so this is just, yeah, here's some candy. Great. Thanks for the candy, Watsy. Let's get to this part. This is the meat, right? Yeah, the rewards stop at 100. I'm just saying it would be funny to get to level, I'm level 113. What are you? Rewriting historic. When we first started talking about rotation and renewal, we also introduced our plans for Magic the Gathering Arena's non-rotating format, Historic. At the time, we announced that Historic would only be available as a best-of-one play queue, and there weren't any plans to add additional events, older sets, or ranked queues at that time. And today, we're here to say that most of that has changed. Another side, Wizards does listen. It'd be nicer if they just nailed it the first time, but you got to at least respect that in the response to pitchforks and torches, they do tend to make changes. Rewriting Historic. After considering some player feedback, we went back to the drawing board and decided on some core criteria for our non-rotating format, Historic. It should feel distinct from other constructed formats, namely Standard. There should be some competitive aspect to it, i.e. ranked, finding a balance for the long-term health of MTG Arena. But with great criteria comes great complications, or something along those lines. How do we balance existing player collections while still making it a format accessible to players who want to jump in? How do we make it feel distinct from Standard while balancing the development time needed to add older cards? If we add new player queues for a brand new format, what does that mean for the quality of matchmaking, including how long it takes to find a match? This first one, let's talk about that. Feel distinct from other constructed formats, namely Standard. This, of course, is hardest right out of the gate. Nobody is confusing Standard with Vintage or anything, but when the delta between Historic and Standard is exactly one set, it's going to be very samey, right? So understandable that they want to do something to make it a little more different than one set's worth of difference right out of the gate. We put a lot of thought into these questions, and we're excited to share the changes we've made. New cards? Who dis? Let's start with bullet point number 1. How can Historic provide fun, unique digital experience that didn't just feel like old Standard? Well, the answer of add new cards to Historic may seem rather obvious, but we landed on a pretty awesome way to leverage MTG Arena's digital playground and growing catalog of Magic cards. Starting in November, we plan to add new cards to MTG Arena from across Magic's history for play in Historic formats and events. No restrictions on set, types, or rarities. No holds barred. New. Okay, wait. Across Magic's history, sure. We also plan to do this regularly, starting with approximately 15 to 20 cards in November, with a reoccurring goal of adding more new cards every quarter after that. That makes sense. These cards will mostly come out independent of Standard sets, and we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, how do I get these cards without crafting them? We know players would love to see entire sets added to MTG Arena, but speaking candidly, the development time required to add hundreds of cards from older sets, knowing that only a few may have a positive impact on Historic, was more time than we could honestly commit. Adding full non-standard sets may come eventually, but right now we'd rather focus on adding meaningful cards on a timeline that players can look forward to. Great, this is what I had always hoped we would do while I was there, and it's what we're doing now. Just adding some cards in, basically. Digitally, you don't even have to do like a master set. You can just add them piecemeal, but I'm curious how they're going to monetize besides doubling our wild cards. We are working with Magic R&D to help ensure the new additions create a fun and interesting format, but we're also interested in player feedback on which cards you'd be most excited to play on and play with on MTG Arena. As we get closer to November, we'll be looking for direct input from players on which cards to prioritize, so be sure to keep an eye out. Wizards, if you happen to watch this, I would love to see you do like literal player voting. Like run some polls with 4 cards that you're totally interested in, and let the community actually pick. That would be fun. 1 for the history books. On to bullet point number 2. How can we add a competitive aspect to Historic? And if you answered add a ranked queue, you'd be correct. Okay, yeah, I kind of want to skip this section. Yeah, okay, they're going to make Historic competitive. I don't care. Historic collections. Of all the criteria we set, bullet point number 3 was probably the trickiest to navigate. We want to ensure that players new to Magic can still learn the ropes and start their collection through Standard and Draft as the primary methods of play. Through Standard and Draft as the primary methods of play, with Historic available to seasoned players looking to explore more of Magic's rich history. But we also needed to look at the long-term impact Historic would have on MTG Arena as a whole, as we move towards supporting it as a true non-rotating format. It's a difficult problem to tackle, but to do so, we're changing how wildcards work for Historic cards. Starting after an update in November, crafting an Historic card will require you to redeem 2 wildcards of the appropriate rarity instead of 1. If an Historic card also appears in a current Standard set, players will be able to redeem 1 wildcard for 1 copy of the Standard version. However, the Historic version will still require 2. Interesting. For example, you can play Luminous Bonds in Historic, whether it's the Rivals of Ixalan version or the Guilds of Ravnica version, but starting in November, the Rivals of Ixalan version will cost 2 common wildcards, while the Guilds of Ravnica version will cost 1 common wildcard. Okay, we all get that. Not making the change until November, so you can craft it the 1-for-1. There's such pitchforks over this. I would wait until they respond to the pitchforks even before I would do anything. And while Historic sets are currently still available for purchase in the store, we plan to limit Historic sets to the 45-pack bundle. Historically, no pun intended, this tended to be the most popular pack bundle for players looking to expand their collection. This will go into effect starting on September 26th. Limited Historic events will be available from time to time for players who prefer drafting as a way to expand their collection. We will have more information on entry price for Historic drafts later on. You're going to charge me more for them too? F you, Wizards. I'm not playing Historic if you're going to charge me more for them. Historic cards and booster packs will continue to offer duplicate protection and contribute to vault progress the same way that Standard sets do. I don't care about the pre-order. Roadmap. That's a lot to cover. There's a lot more happening in the coming weeks. To summarize, players will still be able to use... I don't need the summary. We just talked it all out. Okay, so really that's it. I did want to mention the... Let's go back to soapbox mode here. I did want to mention the fact that, this whole renewal thing is a way to reframe rotation as a positive, which I think is kind of funny but understandable. So, before I even dive into the most controversial part, I want to say the same thing I said at the front of my article on the Mastery Pass and assessing the value there, which is, let's focus on the fundamental questions. The first thing, what have I lost? What have I lost? I haven't lost anything. They're not taking anything away, except what we always knew they were going to do, which is take away the ability for me to use Standard cards after rotation in Standard. So I'm going to not hurl any cucumbers. I'm going to acknowledge that while this may not be exactly the way I would like to see them roll this out or whatever, they're not taking anything away from me that I wasn't expecting to have taken away from me anyway, which is just the ability to use these cards in Standard, right? The other question I have fundamentally is, is the model that they're putting forward as a way to, is this new thing they're offering, is it an opportunity to get a dollars to fund ratio that meets or exceeds my expectations? So can I get my money's worth out of this? And forget the comparison, because here's what everybody does when Wizards rolls out, yes, maybe our wild cards lost value, but not really. The wild card, how did they lose value, Fiddles? They still purchase everything for the same rate that they still purchased before this change, right? Everything we could purchase, which is to say, current Standard. I know that certain cards they're taking away the ability to get certain cards at that rate. I guess that's fair. That you could be mad that, hey, you never told me you were gonna take away my ability to get these older cards at a 1-for-1 rate, and maybe that makes you do something differently. But if so, I mean, wasn't that going to happen right now anyway? That's part of it. Sounds like it's by design, Italian gaming. What if you join Arena 2 years from now? Historic will only be for older players since it will be cost prohibitive. Not necessarily if you buy in the packs, but this is why I think they may change things here. Like, so but also what happens is we assess these things. Of course we want to compare. This is where the monkeys getting grapes versus the monkeys getting cucumbers things come in. Sorry, I've got a spider right above me. Hold on, I'm gonna try and humanely get rid of this spider. I'll put it in a magic box. I got a boxed spider. Anybody want a spider? Want I ship you a spider? Don't worry, spider. You're going to be outside soon. All right, sorry. Sidetrack on spider. Anyway, what happens when we look at these things is we compare to what else we know in the world. So something I'm hearing a lot from the community is, but Hearthstone doesn't do it this way, and these other games do it differently, and Hearthstone, you know, they don't charge me extra for, like, why would you do this? Well, the answer, of course, is because because Wizards wants to make as much money as they can, right? They're trying to make as much money as they can. They think this will accomplish that, and if you don't like it, you can vote with your money, because certainly if everybody abandons this format because of the way they're handling it, then they'll change something. But I think it's very dangerous to put this through the lens of how does it compare to Hearthstone? I mean, I know it's easy. Everybody wants to look around at other games and say, well, other games are doing it this way, so Arena, why aren't you doing it this way? I think the more sensible approach as a Magic player is just understanding whether the dollars to fun value is there in this offering relative to what you expect from Magic. And Magic's an expensive game, and Arena continues to be an insane bargain for me. I mean, you all have watched me. We bought in for 100 on the paid account, and that's like all there. Like, we still have all of that. We've been drafting for free. I get to keep all these cards. I can play almost any standard deck I want. I can do it from my home in my underwear, and it's just like, if WotC wants to get a little greedy here, it doesn't bother me, because I have a high level view of what is my entertainment value proposition here, and is it still good? And frankly, my entertainment value proposition here is still great. It's weird, though, for me. The value proposition is great for me, and probably for most of you. What I don't understand about it is how hard it makes it for future players to get into the format. Because at that point, yeah, you're asking players to pony up for the 45 packs. I can play in my underwear, Ubermensch, but I am panted today. Here, I can kick. Ha! So you have a right to be mad. You have a right to let Wizards know how you feel. You have a right to vote with your money. You have a right to be annoyed that they're trying this, that they're even trying to get their extra value this particular way. But I think that if they get this kind of feedback for a long time, it's going to be the usual deal. Like, lather, rinse, repeat. Launch something, wait for players to scream, and then tweak it towards something in the middle. So I'm kind of waiting for the tweak to this now. We've seen it almost with every major announcement that Wizards has made with regards to a major Arena systems change, that there's public outcry or public feedback, and then they change it. So I'm still kind of expecting that here. I think they are kind of creating a format that is going to be a real feel bad for newer players, which is somewhat of their goal, but eventually you want the newer players to be interested in the older stuff too. So I don't know. Yeah, exactly. They tweaked the mastery pass, etc. Yeah, Wujo, I've been soapboxing for a bit here. We read the update and are talking about it a little bit. I mean, so I get why people are really upset from a psychological standpoint, but I would encourage anybody who's upset about this to really contextualize how much Magic actually costs you and how much Arena is costing you for the Magic you're getting out of it. And like, shrug, okay, double up, I think the value is still there, but I encourage everybody to vote with their money and to give polite feedback to Wizards. And let me give you some advice on giving feedback to game designers and to Wizards. I've done this before, but I want to reiterate it here, especially at times where people have a lot of feedback to give and it's kind of negative. Remember that you're not a doctor. If you go to the doctor, you don't say to the doctor, "I'm pretty sure I have stage 3 lung cancer. Can you fix the problem? Can you deal with that?" You go to the doctor and you tell them what your symptoms are. You say, I have pain and, I'm coughing, whatever. The point is, when you interact with a specialist, a doctor, you don't tell them what to do to you. You tell them what your symptoms are. And it's really a good approach with designers as well, game designers. If you get prescriptive and you tell tell the game designer exactly what you want the system to be, it's usually not very good info because A, if it's a good idea, they probably are already considering it. But B, for the most part, when people say to WotC, do this, they end up saying, make Magic cheaper for me. And if your message to Wizards can be boiled down to, I am mad that you are not making Magic cheaper for me, that's not good feedback. But great feedback is your symptoms. It feels awful to me to have to pay twice the cost for a wild card. It just hits me the wrong way and feels miserable. That's great feedback because game designers do need to know how you're feeling about things and what your symptoms are. And based on your symptoms, they're going to go back and look at all the stuff they need to work through, all the requirements, all the things their boss says has to be in the system, and they'll try and make it better or more appealing or whatever. But it's pretty useless feedback to come to a designer and say, you should do it this way. That's less important feedback than, this is how your system makes me feel. This is the behavior your system is making me do. Oh, and speaking of behavior, all of systems design and all of this game design stuff is about behavior. It's about controlling and incentivizing player behavior to the ways that the company wants. So they are watching your behavior closely. And the thing that is going to matter to them more than any email they get, any tweet you make, any Reddit post you make, any rage you express in some Facebook comment, all of that is nothing compared to whether or not you bust out your wallet and you bust out your time and participate in this thing. If you participate with your time and money, they will see that and get that information out of it. If you just don't participate with your time and money, they will get that message loud and clear as well. So anyway, if you do communicate with words, try to communicate in terms of symptoms. And the best way to communicate is with your wallet and your time. So if you're not happy about that, keep those. If you're not happy about this new announcement, at the very least, keep those things in mind in terms of how to give your feedback, to give yourself the best chance of your feedback actually making a difference. So now, best venue for feedback. That's a great question, James. It depends on who the person is and how Wizards is tracking it. You could probably just... Yeah, where are they tracking the feedback? Forums. I know that that Wizards is looking pretty closely at forums. So, even tweets are okay. Like if you know somebody high up, like I don't think Jay Parker is on Twitter as far as I can tell. Maybe he is. I don't know if Chris Ko or Jay Parker or the community manager, like whoever the community manager is that opened up the video that was in that article. Basically, if you talk to the community managers, they kind of compile that feedback. But yeah, we can send them. I can send them spiders in a deck box. That'll be great. Yeah, I mean, they basically have said that they're trying to put off new players from it, but they do need a way for new players to transition to it once they become old players. And I guess maybe that's pay double wild cards, and that's their plan, you know? Wow. The community manager for Wizards is not on social media. Interesting. Well, you can go to Wizards Help then. Wizards Help compiles feedback. You can do it at MTG Arena, like whatever the main MTG Arena account is. That's probably a good place to do it as well. So yeah, that's what I'd suggest. Do I think they will launch any social updates in the coming months? Yeah, it's been on my list of things I'm expecting that I'm surprised aren't there yet. Maybe they think that they're fine right now with the challenge system as a stopgap, but I think social systems are pretty high up on their to-do list, I bet. If Historic is going to cost more than 1 for 1, what would you recommend in terms of behavior towards it? What do you mean, what do I recommend? I recommend that you spend money on stuff that makes you happy, James. That's what I recommend. Portal of Sanctuary is a really good card in the Omniscience draft, it seems. A lot of power there. You don't understand why they don't want new players to play it. Well, because Magic is overwhelming, and ideally, you keep newer players in a bit more of a walled garden to get warmed up on your game before you expose them to the depth of it. So I think that's what they're thinking. Well, Deacon Black brings up something kind of interesting that I'll touch on then. Deacon says in response to Stephen, that's just them either being obtuse or trying to justify this action. It's not the actuality. A format where cards do not rotate out is inherently more friendly to casual players. And I think that's an interesting comment because as a longtime Magic Online player, Magic Online, before it had Vintage, now it has like fully fledged Vintage, but before Vintage, it had a format called Classic. And Classic on Magic Online was effectively Vintage without the full card pool. And what I found playing it casually, when I played it outside of a tournament, and I don't think I didn't play in many constructed tournaments on Magic Online, but the point is when I played it in the rooms, there were two types of decks I faced. It was very extreme. It was either an experienced long-term Magic player playing the closest thing they could find to Vintage on Magic Online and going way deep and way powerful and, you know, super broken stuff, right? That was one end. Then the other end is exactly what Deacon Black is getting on, which is that the other side of that queue was new players with all sorts of cards who couldn't figure out what the legality of their own deck was and would just play Classic because at least everything was legal there. So it was a very, very much a mix of hyper spiky Vintage style play and beating up on little kid decks, right? So it's it actually draws from two very distinct player types, I would say. Right, you actually want to keep new players out of these queues, otherwise they'll feel bad getting destroyed. Or Magic Online had no matchmaking. You do deck-based matchmaking here. I think with Arena's deck-based matchmaking that they've already got in place, they should be able to keep the little kid decks against little kid decks and the quasi-vintage players against the quasi-vintage players. Let's see. Any AMAs about this? Any places anybody wants to push me on stuff I've said before I call this a stream? They really, certainly the major goal here is to keep Arena centered, front and center, focus on standard and recent limited. I think the most feel bad is when you open a wild card out of an historic booster and you get one half of a wild card. 4 historic cards, but you can use it for standard cards at 1 for 1. Do I think 2-for-1 is too expensive for historic wild cards? Yeah, that's the thing. They kind of have a granularity that doesn't, that's not great. That was one of my, when we were debating between a dust system and a wild card system on the arena team, one of the drawbacks of the wild card system that I pointed out was the lack of granularity. That if you do a dust system, you get to say that, oh, a rare is 10,000 dust. And then you could say, oh, well, an historic rare is 11,000 dust, right? So if you did a dust system, you could have this granularity in this that would be a little more flexible. When you go wild card, it's awfully hard to say that the historic rare is 1.5 wild cards, and we're going to start giving partial wild cards to your system. Like, that's not okay, right? So they went with the wildcard system for the clarity of communication. This is a rare, this is an uncommon, this is a mythic, right? It's nice and clean, but it's not very granular. So it creates a place where the smallest increase in price you can make is to double it, which is a little rough. Could they do 1-to-1 plus golden gems? I mean, they can do anything they want, James, but that's wildly inelegant and gets to the place of paying golden gems directly for cards, which is not how they want it to look. They don't want it to look like the game itself is its own secondary market and you're spending in-game currency to buy specific Magic cards. That's just, even if it's technically possible and legally possible, it's not a look that Wizards wants. Wujo has said, he has always said wild cards are a strictly worse system than common crafting currency. Strongly disagree, Wujo. Strongly disagree. Yes, this is one of the downsides, but and you can certainly take the position that common crafting currency system is better, but the idea that it's strictly worse is kind of hyperbolic nonsense. It tempts me to get into it, but I've soapboxed on why wild cards don't suck as a crafting system many times, so I'm not going to get into it. But to suggest that wild cards don't have any advantages over dust is nonsense. Oh, maybe I'm conflating or maybe I'm equating your thing with dust, Wujo, and you don't mean that. But I would still say you're off base to suggest it says black and white as strictly better. For one thing, the clarity of one mythic, one, the clarity of it is good for new players, Wujo. Yeah, but also if they do that, it's not like the lack of efficiency is part of the plan. You know what I'm saying? That the lack of efficiency that you're saying is what makes it strictly worse, Wujo, is what makes it in some ways better for Wizards. So Media suggests that it's not every time they change anything. They have been in a string of awful decisions lately. Maybe it's not every time, Media, but they have a pretty long track record of needing to adjust rollouts because they do have, I know, I've been there, I was there. There is an internal philosophy of aiming greedy so that you can roll back to less greedy. Like, that's just a strategy that Wizards has. Aim greedy and then roll back to less greedy. Because that direction at least produces, like, again, you want to nail it the first time, but the result of your customers say, hey, I don't like this, and you say, you say, well, we'll adjust it then then it's like, yeah, you want to get it right. But it's so much easier to say, we'll adjust it in your favor rather than, we were too generous, let's adjust it out of your favor. That's what they're really trying to avoid. Anyway. Yeah, let's focus on a positive about this. The toughness of hearing what they want to charge for it is rough. And again, complain all you want in appropriate ways about that. But what I do love is that they're involving R&D in creating a new digital arena format. One thing I would say for viewers watching me, I do think this will eventually impact paper. I think you want to, like, as someone in the secondary market, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on cards they announce that are going into historic. Because I do expect that historic will, if popular, historic will eventually make its way to a paper format. And if historic makes its way to a paper format, then you're going to want to be on the front edge of getting singles for that if it's important to you. So I'm also thinking about it from a paper secondary market standpoint, even though it's a digital initiative. It will impact paper, I think. But also, I'm just really excited to have an eternal format that R&D is working on that's a new puzzle for people to solve. I think this will be good. And I think it will probably lead to something that they support in paper. I've always expected, and this comes from nothing I know inside, okay? This is not insider knowledge. This is just me predicting Wizards. I would expect some sort of paper-based non-rotating format that starts later than Modern. So like in my head, I call it postmodern. I expect there will be some kind of postmodern Magic Eternal format. And the fact that digital is starting with historic makes a strong suggestion that eventually paper will have a new non-rotating format called historic, and we'll see. It depends. I think Tarion is questioning whether they will ever make historic an official paper format based on the current plan. And I think, Tarion, Origins Forward makes total sense for a postmodern starting point, but also matching your insanely popular digital format also makes a lot of sense. So here's the thing. If they add stuff to this set that you can't imagine them making part of a paper Eternal format, then maybe you're right. But if it all falls in line, what I expect is that we're going to get a lot of stuff that is recent or would be reprintable recently without being a big deal. I don't think they're going to have, Ruffalos or that's probably not reprintable anyway. But it's not a guarantee, but I would expect that eventually this tail will wag the dog and that Paper Magic will be serving historic needs. Modern is non-rotating. Yes, Dionysus. I don't know what any of the cards they floated, but if they've floated a bunch of super powerful cards, then yeah, Deacon doesn't like the whole backwards, but then you get the problem that they're trying to solve of it's no fun to have a format on Arena that is exactly one set different from the format you were just playing. They really need to make it different from Standard. But here's what I would do if I were at Wizards. I would do what they're doing, but to make it different from Standard, I would be making sure that everything I was adding to the system to start with was Origins Forward, so that you could do something like, oh, actually, we're just going to make it Origins Forward now. So imagine that, like maybe that's a way to think of it, Deacon, that may make you have a little hope for it or a little bit happier if they did it that way, where it's like, but of course they probably want to do older stuff because it's cool. But that would be my approach. My approach would be seeding the new format with a bunch of stuff from Origins Forward, such that eventually you could make this whole format Origins Forward, and the early stuff was just part of what was eventually going to be added in its entirety. But I'm sure they have a lot to do to figure that out. By the way, I made platinum on both free-to-play and paid, so that was cool. Yeah, Worm Coil Engine I heard about. That would be strong. Firebolt. You know, Firebolt becomes... well, Firebolt's part of Modern now, thanks to Modern Horizons. But yeah, if they do some... if they add any modern illegal stuff, that will be really interesting. Then it may challenge my view of this becoming a supported eternal paper format eventually. Steven asks, do you have an understanding of how you get the new old cards for Historic? Are they peppered into the existing Historic boosters? No, yeah, they didn't announce that, did they? It sounded like... Yeah, we'll have to see how they're going to make those available. If we have to just right out of the gate double up our wild cards to get Firebolt or whatever, then I'm probably just not going to participate in Historic beyond having some cards for it. And I'll vote with my time and money, as I said. Hey, Kunio. What does Andrew have to say? He thinks Sam Black is right that seeding the format like they are proposing is just going to be lame for deck building. Do you think it's just going to force it? Because if you only add 20 cards and you're saying, obviously, use these 20? Yeah, I think that's what Andrew's saying there. People don't like having their deck spoon-fed to them. They like to think that they came up with the idea themselves. It depends on how many they add in. I mean, Kunio, if they just pepper in a bunch of build-arounds, but it's not obvious exactly how to build around, I think that's okay. Give me 20 interesting build-arounds. Yeah, there's Modern's got such a huge card pool that you can kind of pull decks out of nothing. But mostly stuff is there because it's an R&D plant. And I trust R&D to... It's a tough line to be splashy versus broken. You know, they're going to want to be splashy without breaking it. We'll see. Yeah, I don't think they want to give out... they don't want to give out historic format cards as prizes you get randomly because many players are not going to be interested in historic. Anyway. Yeah, extra long stream. Talked about the new thing. We'll see if Sam Black's fears play out, Andrew, but I think I'm gonna give R&D a little benefit of the doubt that they can inject some cards that don't just make us build our decks, you know, for ourselves. And also, you know, frankly, like, yeah, people don't want their decks spoon-fed, but they want handholds. It's a very tough balance. You don't want someone to, you don't want to build their deck for them, but if you don't give new players handholds, they don't, you know, it's tough. So we'll see. I'm looking forward to seeing what the format shakes out to be, and I'm looking forward to see how looking forward to seeing how WotC walks back half of their announcement. That's what they usually do. Maybe it won't happen this time. But I would say my final advice to you is do not rush out and stockpile historic rares from wild cards, because until like a week plus has gone by and they have stood pat on this plan. I'm not doing anything until they have stood pat on a plan for like 2 weeks, you know? Then we'll talk. All right. Well, I guess Kunio is not streaming, but maybe somebody else is out there that we can raid before I get out of here.